What's up guys, Gabriel Varga here. Today I want to talk about headgear, how important it is, whether I use it, when I use it, all these subjects. And I think this is a great time to look at it because recently Max Holloway talked about hard sparring, how important it was, and urging fighters, pleading for them to stop the hard sparring. Now hopefully you guys have already heard my opinion on that conversation on hard sparring, but you have not heard my opinion on headgear. And that is very important because 100% I believe headgear has pros and cons, and I think everybody out there should know both sides of the table and recognize whether you should be using it or not. So that is what we're talking about today. All right guys, headgear. Headgear is the conversation today, and I want to talk about how often I use it, what my practices have been throughout the years. Before we get into it guys, if you haven't already, get subscribed please. Now, moving on, when I was younger, when I was starting off, I wore headgear all the time. The main reason was people wanted me to be safe. They went, you know what, you're the smaller person in class, you don't have the ability to protect yourself, at least not the way I do now, and it's very important to protect your head. But if you guys watch Olympic boxing, you will have heard that about, I think it was 4 years ago, they removed headgear from the Olympics. And why did they do this? Well, there were a number of studies out showing that headgear makes no difference in the impact your head actually takes. It's not like the headgear absorbs the punch and your head moves less. You still get hit just as hard. And according to the study, the big issue here, this is the big issue, you get hit more with headgear on. Which brings out the question, why wear headgear at all? And that is a very good question. Now, in my opinion, headgear is fantastic for stopping cuts, stopping bruising to the face, possibly avoiding a broken nose. But 100% agree with the fact that I get hit and most everybody else gets hit more often with headgear on. Why does that happen? Well, it generally restricts your sight. The headgear is tight around the eyes, and when I turn this direction, I now lose sight of my opponent. If I drop my chin too far, sometimes I lose sight of my opponent. Your head is extra big, your hands are extra wide because you can't pull them quite as tight. All of this adds up to you getting hit more. So that is obviously the con. That is the negative of headgear, and the Olympic Committee recognized that and removed it from Olympic boxing. But the big plus side to headgear, which everybody should know, is it's gonna keep you pretty. You know, you don't wanna be walking around with loads of scars, your nose mashed over to one side. And just for other purposes like headbutts, it's really good for stopping headbutts, and a head-on-head collision will give you a certain amount of impact. So if both sparring partners are wearing headgear and you have headbutts or head clashes, it's fantastic for keeping you protected. So let's get into it right now. Do I use headgear? When do I use headgear? What headgear do I use? So first off, number one, yes, I do use headgear, but right away that leads me to number two. Not all the time. I don't use it all the time. So let's talk about specifically when I use headgear. For myself, and this is just personal to me, whenever I do strictly boxing, and I do a lot of strict boxing rounds, that is when the headgear goes on. I find personally with headgear, it restricts my vision. And if I have a headgear on and there's kicking and knees and maybe elbows and maybe for MMA takedowns, all that, it's just so much harder to defend. But when we only have two tools for boxing, we have two hands, and that's all I'm focusing on, the headgear doesn't impede me too much. And also, throughout the years, one of my main priorities has been to keep the nose kind of straight, to avoid it being way off to one side. When we're putting in boxing rounds, those are generally a little bit harder and you're more likely to get hit in the nose. I don't want my nose getting broken in sparring. So in boxing, in strictly boxing, I always have my headgear on. But that leads me to point number three. What type of headgear do I use? I have no interest in wearing a headgear that's just kind of a little shell that goes around and gives you no face protection. The main reason for me to use headgear is for the face protection. So that is why this has been the only headgear that I have used for the past, I think it's almost 10 years now I've had this. This is the winning headgear with the bar across it, obviously. I actually got this because I saw Manny Pacquiao sparring with it lots, and I went, oh, it looks like that's a pretty decent headgear. Now, I have tried kickboxing with it. It 100% does not work. Why is that? Well, if I throw the headgear on, you guys will see right away that as soon as I tuck my chin, I can't see you anymore. And if I hold my head up, I can't see the legs. So I have this little area, this little vision, this tunnel vision here, where if I keep my head neutral, I can see the body and upwards. If I drop my head, I can see the legs. And the reason I stopped using it was for other people's safety. Because one of the first times I ever used this in kickboxing sparring, I was looking up, the guy's hands were up. I looked down, I lost sight of his head, I threw the high kick looking down as a fake, and I thought his hands would be up, so I didn't pull the kick. His hands had dropped because he 100% fell for the fake, and I hit him and gave him a concussion. Not a massive concussion, but enough of a concussion that I felt terrible. And I went, normally I would have pulled that shot, but the headgear actually impeded my vision to protect others. So I had to get rid of it. But this headgear, aside from not being fantastic for kickboxing, is great for boxing. Again, when I strap it on, and I have it here, the bar does not touch my nose. There's about a millimeter distance between my nose and the bar, and everything fits very, very snug. So when I take impact on the face there, it does not touch my nose. And that is just lovely for sparring when you don't want to have your nose get crunched in all the time. I mean, I get it in the kickboxing rounds anyway, so I have that ability to not condition, but just to experience getting hit in the nose so I don't forget that and get in the fight and get popped and go, oh my gosh, why my eyes are watering, what's happening? Overall, I don't find that it really makes me get hit too much more with this bar. My brother had one and the bar actually came out about that far to really protect the nose, and he found he got hit way more because of the little fade backs that you normally do, you know, you move your head back that much and you're still getting hit because this bar is sticking out that much more. I think he had a Cleto Reyes bar headgear, but this one for me has been fantastic. Now, before you go over to the winning website, just know these are very expensive. I believe this was $400 or $500, but the question being, after almost having this for 10 years, it might even be over 10, yes, over 10 years now, is it worth it? Would I have bought it again? And the answer is yes. I love this headgear. I use it for all my sparring. We're talking over 10 years ago that I bought this, and it still looks like new. Nothing bad has happened to it. It was a worthwhile buy. If you break down like, oh, every year it cost me $40 or $50 so far. And would I trade it in for another headgear? Is there any issues? No. This is my go-to headgear for kickboxing. I will continue to spar without headgear so I can see everything, protect myself really well, protect others. For the boxing, I will continue to use the winning headgear. So I'm always interested as well to know what other people are doing. If you guys wear headgear, say yes. Let me know in the comments below. If you have a certain style of headgear you use that you find very beneficial, also let me know. I mean, I might look into getting some new headgear for MMA rounds. So guys, I hope you had fun learning about what headgear I use when I use it. If you guys enjoyed the video, you got something out of it, give it a like. If you haven't, get subscribed. Guys, as always, train hard, and I'll see you back here soon for another video.